everybody, welcome to the second last set review for War of the Spark on the Mana Leek. I'm John, as always. Today we're going to be taking a look at the first half of the multicolored spells. We're going to start with Ajani the Greathearted and go all the way down to Soul Diviner. 35 cards today, which leaves 35 cards tomorrow between multicolored, colorless, artifact, and lands. As always, make sure you go check out the previous set reviews so you can see the rest of the cards in the sets, and so you can get the disclaimers back on the very first set review, most important of which is that this is a limited set review about draft, and of course, most of that is applicable to sealed. Just imagine everything's a little tiny bit slower. But without further ado, we're going to start off with our first multicolored card, Ajani the Greathearted. We're going to have a lot of Planeswalkers in this set review video, so strap in. Ajani the Greathearted is 2 green-white for a legendary Planeswalker. Ajani at rare, he starts with 5 loyalty. Creatures you control have Vigilance, is his passive ability. +1, you gain 3 life. -2, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each other Planeswalker you control. Ajani seems like a super solid Planeswalker. The static ability is fine, but not something I go crazy over. We talk about this with Vigilance all the time. I like it. I just don't want to pay too much for it. Gaining life is nice, combos with his Pridemate, obviously, but again, it's not something that I'm going insane over, but I've got the option for it. I may as well do it whenever it's relevant. Putting a counter on your team is a very good ability, and I can do it twice before I have to start gaining life, and, you know, what a world you live in that you've put 2 +1/+1 counters on every single creature you have, and now you have to gain 3 life every turn. Yeah, Johnny's real good, like a slam dunk first pick. B+, because I don't quite think he's A level. He's not stabilizing the game unless you do have a board state. He will be not exactly the top deck that you want to see when you're a little bit behind and you top deck him and you've got one creature that you're going to put a counter on, I guess. Yeah. Very, very, very solid. +2 colors, which means it's going to be downgraded a little bit as well. But a strong B+ for Ajani here. He's still a first pick in a number of packs. B+ for Ajani the Greathearted. Angrath's Rampage is up next. Angrath's Rampage is black-red for a sorcery at uncommon. Choose 1. Target player sacrifices an artifact. Target player sacrifices a creature. Target player sacrifices a Planeswalker. Yeah, Angrath's Rampage is fine, but I hear people going nuts about it, and I don't quite get it. It's sorcery speed, which is like the worst kind of edict. You really want them to be instant speed so that you have a greater chance of casting them when they're actually relevant. You are probably never going to be choosing artifact, but when you do, there's probably going to be one artifact on the table that you want them to kill, and it's going to be their only choice. It's going to be one of those rare artifacts, the Arcbow, the Tank, the Parhelion. Same with Planeswalkers. I predict that generally there's going to be 1 Planeswalker on the table. There will be 2. You will absolutely see 2. That's not going to be abnormal, but I don't think you're going to have a whole bunch of them, which means this is targeted-ish Planeswalker removal, which is fine. But as we talked about yesterday and we've talked about before, or maybe it was 2 days ago that I talked about it and ranted about it a little bit, most of the Planeswalkers you're going to see are uncommon. Most of the Planeswalkers will have vomited up all of their value or half of their value the first turn they come out. Targeted Planeswalker removal is not going to be vital a huge amount of the time, but it will be nice some of the time, and that's basically the definition of a sideboard card. Target player sacrifices a creature is obviously the most probably used mode of this card, and again, it's just an edict effect. You need to use this very, very, very early, otherwise your opponent's just going to have a whole bunch of choices to choose from. Now, I still think this card is fine, and like edicts, I do typically play them if I have a spot. I have them at like a C or a C+. The artifact and Planeswalker bonuses on this, I think, are at the D+ level because I think they're sideboard only. So I'm going to put Angrath's Rampage at like a C+, I think. And it's a C+ at best. I've heard people being like B+. It's just an edict effect. Those aren't amazing. So C+ for Angrath's Rampage. Convince me otherwise, I guess. Bioessence Hydra is up next. Bioessence Hydra is 3 green-blue for a creature Hydra mutant at rare. It's a 4/4 with trample. Bioessence Hydra enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each loyalty counter on planeswalkers you control. Whenever one or more loyalty counters are put on planeswalkers you control, put that many +1/+1 counters on Bioessence Hydra. This is good because it's fine on its own. A 4/4 for 5 trample is okay. It's like a C, maybe even a C+, because that's big enough that the trample's actually relevant. Assuming you have planeswalkers and this gets even 1 counter on it, just becomes super solid. A sort of a build around first pick, because I think you'll start playing some of the more sideboardy mediocre walkers if you do have this card. Yeah, I think it's a strong B, like build around. I'm not sure if I'd go up to B+, but the trample does make this super, super relevant. Let's go with a strong B build around, assuming that you are having, you know, kind of the greater than average 3 or 4 or 5 planeswalkers in your deck. And even if you have none, I think this is still like a strong C+. C+, B, Bioessence Hydra. Up next is Casualties of War. Casualties of War is 2 black, black, green, green for a sorcery at rare. Choose 1 or more. Destroy target artifact. Destroy target creature. Destroy target enchantment. Destroy target land. Destroy target planeswalker. Yeah, about that. Kill stuff for a lot of mana and completely unsplashable. If you're Golgari, this will kill a creature. Probably a creature you really, really want dead because it's your choice. And maybe a planeswalker, if they have one out, for 6 mana. That's not awful. You're probably not killing an artifact with this, or if you do, it doesn't really matter. You're probably not killing an enchantment with this. If you are, it might matter, because there's very few in this set, and the ones that are in the set are pretty decent. And you're killing a land on turn 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, which is basically meaningless. So I think this is fine. I think it's just a very hard, very unsplashable removal spell, basically. It's like a B- if you are Golgari, but literally no other deck wants this, and you do not first pick this. I do not go into Golgari for this card. This is a card that I desperately want to see pack 3, pick 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 when I already am 100% in Golgari, and then I go, aha, I got rewarded. Pack 1, I don't want to take this card if I can help it, but once you're there, once you are black-green, it's a B-. Cruel Celebrant is up next. Cruel Celebrant is white-black for a creature vampire at uncommon. She's a 1/2. Whenever Cruel Celebrant or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So almost there. Black-red is where a lot of the sacrifice shenanigans are, and this is black-white, which means you might have to be Mardu to really pull off the high-value sacrifice aristocrats deck, but there are a number of ways to sacrifice just in straight black that probably makes Cruel Celebrant decent. And even if you're not sacrificing things and things are just dying the natural way through combat, Cruel Celebrant's probably still fine since she is only 2 mana. Not really a relevant body, but stuff dying is going to make her get you some serious value. I've got her at a strong C+, maybe even a B-, and of course if you do want to get really spicy, splash her in the red-black sack deck. C+ for Cruel Celebrant. Death Sprout is up next. Death Sprout is 1 black, black, green for an instant at uncommon. Destroy target creature. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This card is very, 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 very good, and it's splashable assuming you're black. If you're black, you can splash that green. If you're black, white, black, red, whatever. If you're green, maybe don't splash this. It's unconditional, instant speed removal, and that is fantastic, especially for just 4 mana. The land's cute, but if you already have black, black, green, and another land, you're probably not fixing your mana or anything here, but I guess you are ramping, but you know what I say about ramp on turn 4 or later. Still, just a little bit of gravy that doesn't really matter. Super solid A- removal. I don't know about first picking it, because it does heavily put you into black-green. It at least very heavily put you into black, but it is just like A- premium removal here. A- for Death Sprout. Despark is up next. Despark is white-black for an instant at uncommon. Exile target permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater. This is really good, and if you weren't listening carefully or misunderstood something, you might have thought that I was going to give this like a D+, like Smite the Monstrous. But this is not power 4 or greater. This is converted mana cost 4 or greater. And basically every deck plays permanents that are mana cost 4 or greater. They might not have power 4 or greater. They might be a planeswalker. They might be an artifact or an enchantment. But if they have CMC 4 or greater, this gets to kill it at instant speed for 2 mana, and that's very, 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 very good. I think this is great removal. It's going to remove something that's typically very, very relevant, and it's just so broad that it can hit any permanent. I've got this at a strong B+. I think it just misses out on the A- since you can't use it early game. You can't use it on any smaller threats, but typically what you're going to kill, you really want dead with this. So a very strong B+ for Despark. Up next is Domri, Anarch of Bolas. Domri, Anarch of Bolas is 1 red-green for legendary planeswalker Domri at rare. He's a 3 loyalty planeswalker with the passive ability of creatures you control get +1/+0. +1, add red or green. Creature spells you cast this turn can't be countered. -2, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So an aggro anthem, so an anthem that doesn't buff the butt, doesn't give you a toughness boost here, is not bad at all. And a mana dork is also great, although the can't be countered line isn't terribly important in limited. And fights when is appropriate on demand? Awesome. Domri looks super solid. I think I actually can jump up to an A- on this. It sort of protects itself, assuming that you can fight and remove a creature that might have dealt damage to him. And the effects can really pile up with that aggro anthem and the ramp, which, you know, turn 3 is kind of the upper limit of where ramp is still totally good to have. So I think I've got Domri on just an A-. Very, very strong planeswalker here. A- for Domri. Domri's Ambush is up next. Domri's Ambush is red-green for a sorcery at uncommon. Yes, it's a sorcery. Ambush doesn't have to mean instant speed. Relax, it's happened before. Domri's Ambush is red-green for a sorcery at uncommon. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then that creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. This card is fantastic. A bite spell that gives you a counter for only 2 mana. It's so good. If this was instant speed, it would be insane. Super, super good. The fact that it can kill a planeswalker may be relevant and good now and then, but this just eats creatures left and right and leaves you with a bigger creature than you had before. Strong B+ here. I'm not going to go up to the A range because you do have to have a creature, and it has to be a creature of relevant size, but it helps make it a relevant size. So B+ for Domri's Ambush. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Dovin's Veto is up next. Dovin's Veto is white-blue for an instant at uncommon. This spell can't be countered. Counter target non-creature spell. Not a huge fan. It's negate, but slightly better negate because it can't be countered. But how many times was negate countered in limited? Basically never. This has constructed implications, but I'm not touching this in a limited deck. You know, I might play it out of the sideboard. If my opponent has a planeswalker that I'm afraid of, maybe one of the rares, definitely the mythics, this comes on in. If they have some other spell that I'm very afraid of, I'll bring this in as like a D. The problem with counterspells, of course, is you have to have the mana, you have to have the card at exactly that one time. You have no other chance. And that's why this isn't going to get the D+ grade. It is just a D for Dovin's Veto. Dreadhonde Butcher is up next. Dreadhonde Butcher is black-red for a creature zombie warrior at rare. It's a 1/1, but not for long. It's got haste. Whenever Dreadhonde Butcher deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, put a +1/+1 counter on Dreadhonde Butcher. When Dreadhonde Butcher dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. This card is amazing on turn 2 when your opponent didn't have a blocker. It's a 1/1, but it's one of those rare 1/1s that can be very good. It's similar to Stromkirk Noble, which is an incredible limited 1/1 for 1. Swings in on turn 2, hopefully in an empty board, and becomes a 2/2. At that point, this card has become solid because now you have a 2/2 for 2. That's going to be a relevant body. It's going to be slightly better to get in. Note that you're not proliferating this. There's no proliferate in black or red. But get in one more time and you've got a super relevant 3/3. Then when it does eventually die somehow, you still get to hit them one more time. Now the problem here is that this is an awful, awful, awful late game top deck. You're going to be top decking a 1/1 that is not going to be getting through, is not going to be growing, and at best is going to deal 1 damage when you just suicide it in. So yeah, Dreadhonde Butcher unfortunately is an amazing card, but you have to draw it early, and that hurts it a bit. So it's kind of hard to grade this exactly. I think it's like a B-, I guess. I would always play it just for the chance of basically getting a free win potentially, but boy, you really do need to draw this card early. So B-, but be aware it's going to be one of the worst top decks in the format. The blow up potential is just so high though that I'm willing to put this in my deck, whereas some other cards that you must have early, I'm not willing to. Up next is my other preview card, Elite Guard Mage. Elite Guard Mage is 2 white-blue for a creature human wizard at uncommon for a 2/3 flyer. They are flying, keep that in mind. When Elite Guard Mage enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life and you draw a card. It's Cloud Blazer, it's Muldrifter, etc. As well, just once again, as I mentioned in my preview video, shout out to the artist who is local here to London, Ontario, and this is their very first card. So a 2/3 flyer for 4 isn't exactly the best stats-wise. I'd rather have a 3/2, but drawing that card and gaining 3 life is just very good gravy. This just seems like a very solid, very good card. I'd happily play multiples of it. It's not quite a first pick. It is 2 colors. It's splashable. It might be good enough to splash, but I'm very happy with this as a strong B-. Enter the God Eternals is up next. Enter the God Eternals is 2 blue/black for a sorcery at rare. Enter the God Eternals deals 4 damage to target creature, and you gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. Target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, and you amass 4. There's a whole lot of stuff written on this card. It is basically a 5 mana 4/4 that deals 4 to a creature, and you gain 4 life. That's awesome. Milling 4, whatever, I don't care about that. Take it off the card, keep it on the card. It literally changes nothing here. But this is just a solid card if you're blue-black. Splashing this is going to be kind of hard if you're not base blue. I think there's basically a cycle of these cards, maybe not exactly a cycle of cards that are a blue card that you could splash in some other deck for the black. But still, real good card. Probably good enough for a first pick, I think. Obviously, you're locking yourself in a little bit, but it is a very, very good card. I don't think it would go over premium removal, though, but I've got this at a very solid B for Enter the God Eternals. Feather the Redeemed is up next. Feather the Redeemed is red, white for a legendary creature Angel at rare. She's a 3/4 flyer. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. This is really interesting. Obviously, if you're red-white, this is just an undercosted, well-statted flyer that you're super happy with all the time anyways. But in addition to that, your combat tricks get to be reused, which is super awesome. Now, if you want to get really gross, pair this with fight spells somehow. That's super gross. But there also isn't really fixing that I'm super happy with in this format. Outside of green cards, I really don't like the artifact stuff. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But if you pull it off, let me know, because it would be hilarious. But even just getting to reuse some combat tricks, because there are some decent ones in red and white, you're going to be very happy. And even if all you have is a 3/4 flyer for 3, you're still going to be very, very, very happy. I've got Feather at a strong B. I think she's probably just first pickable in many packs. Maybe even over some premium removal, but maybe not. I'm not positive on that. B for Feather the Redeemed. Gleaming Overseer is up next. Gleaming Overseer is 1 blue-black for a creature zombie wizard at uncommon. It's a 1/4. When Gleaming Overseer enters the battlefield, amass 1. Zombie tokens, which again are just going to be armies unless you have like Liliana or something, have hexproof and menace. If you have a bunch of amass, which you probably do in blue-black, in fact, you may just be the amass deck if you're blue-black, this is great. Get that army token big enough, and it's only dying via Death Touch, basically, because it's got menace and it's got hexproof. Now, it'll take maybe a couple of cards, but your opponent could just kill the Gleaming Overseer. and then they are free to target and kill the zombie token, unfortunately. But this card is exactly what you want to see if you're going into blue-black, if you're going into blue-black Amass. I'd even strongly consider taking this first, and then just picking up all of the Amass cards that may not be as good outside of the Amass deck. I think this is like a strong B. I'm not going to go any higher for a card that doesn't do much else by itself other than make a 1/1 hexproof menace, but I'm also not going to go any lower. So B for Gleaming Overseer. Up next is Heartwarming Redemption. Heartwarming Redemption is 2 red-white for an instant at uncommon. Discard all the cards in your hand, then draw that many plus 1. You gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand. I'm not exactly a huge fan of this. It also doesn't really feel red-white. I guess red is you're discarding cards and white is you're gaining life. Yeah, at turn 4, turn 5, when you might be casting this, you're probably discarding usually 1 or 2 cards, which means you're drawing 2 or 3, which I guess is good in red-white. Red-white would typically kill for card draw, and you're gaining some life, which is meaningless. I think the real upside is that this is instant speed, which I think probably pushes this into the totally okay range, like C+. I think I probably just always play this if I'm in red-white, but I don't think it pulls me into red-white. It's not a card that I'm picking super highly. I think it is just like a C+. Huatli's Raptor is up next. Huatli's Raptor is green-white for a creature dinosaur at uncommon. It's a 2/3 with Vigilance. When Huatli's Raptor enters the battlefield, proliferate. 2/3 Vigilance for 2? Sure. Totally fine. 2 mana for an extra point of toughness, which we don't usually get. Totally fine. Proliferating when it comes in, that's a nice bonus. I think what that does more is it makes this a better top deck card, because a 2/3 Vigilance would be pretty bad on turn 9, but if it proliferates, cool. On turn 2, it's probably not proliferating. So unfortunately, I think this thing fights against itself back and forth. You're only probably getting the good half of this. You're never getting both halves to be super relevant. So I think it is just like a strong C+. You always, always, always play it if you're green-white, but I don't think it's any higher than a C+. Next up is Invade the City. Invade the City is 1 blue-red for a sorcery at uncommon. Amass X, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Obviously, a complete build-around for the blue-red spells deck. You need to have a whole bunch of instants and sorceries for this to be super relevant. I'm going to want like a bare minimum, I think, of 3 for this to be in any way good. And then, of course, if you can pump that up by a lot, it's going to be very, 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 very good. The trick is, your zombie army still probably doesn't have trample or anything relevant. Can still be bounced, can still be killed. So I think there are better blue-red spell payoffs. So I'm only really going to put this at like a C+ if you're in blue-red spells, and if you didn't quite get the spell deck to work, you're in blue-red, good blue-red cards, this probably goes down even more. So I'm going to go for a C+ with Invade the City, and not much higher. Up next is Leyline Prowler. Leyline Prowler is 1 black-green for a creature Nightmare Beast at uncommon. It's a 2/3 with Death Touch, Lifelink. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. What a weird card. It's Vampire Nighthawk, except instead of flying, you get making mana? Very weird, but also just very, very good. Very versatile, blocks super well, it attacks for that life gain if you can, and it ramps while it's still relevant. This wouldn't be an awful first pick. It's a utility creature, so I'm not really going to go any higher than a B on it, but it's a B. It's a real good B. Living Twister is up next. Living Twister is red-red-green for a creature elemental at rare. It's a 2/5. Pay 1 and a red and discard a land card. Living Twister deals 2 damage to any target. Pay a green, return a tapped land you control to its owner's hand. A 2/5 for 3 is pretty cheap. It doesn't do much, but it's nice and cheap. Turning lands into shock late in the game is pretty nice, though, I think. And it doesn't tap the elemental, which means you can machine gun it a little bit. You can pay 2, discard, deal 2, pay 2, discard, deal 2, pay 2, discard, deal 2 if you have 3 lands in your hand. Also, really late game, you can just start popping lands back to your hand to throw at your opponent. I think this is probably just good, but there's some real setup and time spent on getting this to the game-winning situation. You're also heavily telegraphing to your opponent what your plan is by playing this relatively early, and I also am just not 100% sure that this goes into the red-green beef plan. So it's a weird card. I don't quite feel like it's on plan for the deck, but it'll still probably work just fine. I think it's a strong B? Maybe a B-, just because of the setup and such. Let's go with B- for Living Twister. Up next is Mayhem Devil. Mayhem Devil is 1 black-red for a creature devil at uncommon. It's a 3/3. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. It's a totally fine C as a 3/3 for 3. If you're sacking things and getting in damage, it's a strong C+. If you're really sacking things, like you've actually built the black-red sack deck, which is its preferable archetype, then I think this actually jumps up to like a B-. Unlike Cruel Celebrant, this is in the exact right colors you want to be in to really take advantage of this. So I think in the good black-red sack deck, this is like a strong B-. And even outside of it, I think it's a strong C+. So C+, B- for Mayhem Devil. Merfolk Skydiver is up next. Merfolk Skydiver is green-blue for a creature Merfolk Mutant at uncommon. It's a 1/1 flyer. When Merfolk Skydiver enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It can target itself. Pay 3 green-blue, proliferate. This seems totally solid. A 2-mana 1/1 flyer is not my jam, but a 2/2 is, definitely is. Or if something else could really use that counter, that's cool too. Then, later in the game, having a repeatable proliferate mana sink is basically my dream. Really, really good. This is probably, it might be a first pick build around. Obviously, you're putting yourself into one very specific deck with this. I think I'd slightly prefer to take this as a reward once I've started to go down this path, or even, glanced at the path. I think we start picking this pretty highly. I think it's a very, very, very strong B- in the blue-green counters deck. Let's maybe just hold off on first picking it for now. B- for Merfolk Skydiver. Neoform is up next. Neoform is green-blue for a sorcery at uncommon. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, then shuffle your library. It's Birthing Pod. It's single-use sorcery speed Birthing Pod. I never really liked Eldritch Evolution in Draft. This will obviously appear more regularly because it's uncommon rather than Eldritch Evolution's rare. I just think the odds are a bit too low here to make this work. You need to have the right CMC creature on the battlefield and have the right CMC creature in your library, and remember that, and not already have drawn or played or sent to the graveyard the correct creatures. This isn't my jam. I think people probably learned in the last set with Vannifar that Birthing Pod really doesn't work that well in Limited. I think this is like a D-. I just have no interest in playing Neoform. D- for Neoform. Up next is, Nicol Bolas, Dragon God, the big one. Nicol Bolas is blue, black, red, or I guess Uber. For a legendary Planeswalker Bolas at Mythic, he starts with 4 loyalty. Nicol Bolas Dragon God has all loyalty abilities of all other Planeswalkers on the battlefield. That is just plus and minuses. He doesn't get the static abilities. +1, you draw a card. Each opponent exiles a card from their hand or a permanent they control. -3, destroy target creature or Planeswalker. -8, each opponent who doesn't control a legendary creature or Planeswalker loses the game. Let's get it out of the way. You're never ever not playing Bolas. If you see this in your pack, you're picking it, you're playing it, even if it's dumb or incorrect with what else you get in your pod. That's just a foregone conclusion. His casting cost is rough. You have to make sure that you have the fixing to pull this off, or at the very least make sure that you are absolutely definitely a black deck, and then also be red or blue, and then splash for the red or the blue. Preferably still, though, a little bit of fixing would be really handy. Having all other Planeswalkers' abilities is cute but random. You have very little, if any, control over whether he has like an additional 12 abilities or an additional 0 abilities. So that's really hard to grade, and not even really worth grading because it's so random. +1 is fantastic. It's basically Karn's hand exile, and drawing a card is nutty. That's a fantastic +1. Killing something for -3 is equally great. And if you do get to 8, which could be hard, you maybe just literally end the game. Not figuratively, not you're doing really well so you're going to win. You literally end the game. That's great too. Bolas is just a slam dunk A+ on the battlefield. Need to make sure that you're able to cast him, so pick that fixing. Even some of that maybe not 100% good fixing. Pick it. Nicol Bolas, A+. make sure you can cast him, but you're never not taking him anyways, right? Up next is Niv-Mizzet Reborn, the other big dragon. Niv-Mizzet Reborn is white, blue, black, red, green for a legendary creature dragon avatar at Mythic. It's a 6/6 flyer. When Niv-Mizzet Reborn enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them. Put the chosen cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That means that you can grab a Is It card and put it into your hand if you reveal it. You can grab a Simic card, but you can't grab anything that's 3 colors or anything that's 1 color, etc. So, I have been threatened by Tappy Toeclaws that if I say anything bad about her good dragon boy here, which she successfully cast almost every game in the pre-release and revealed casually mythics and put them into her hand and won her games, that she would downvote everything that I ever produce. So based on 3 data points, Niv-Mizzet Reborn is super easy to cast, super relevant, will draw you cards, is a bomb, and will win you games. Realistically, though, Niv-Mizzet's an F. You should not play this. It's going to be so hard to cast. Sealed at the pre-release, or at the pre-release, may be your best bet because it's going to be slow. You're going to have players playing with cards they don't quite know how good they are, or playing bad cards, etc. So if you want a shot, go for it at your pre-release. But in general, this is an F that you probably should never play. F for Niv-Mizzet Reborn. Bring on the downvotes. Up next is Oath of Kaya. Oath of Kaya is 1 white-black for a legendary enchantment at rare. When Oath of Kaya enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. Whenever an opponent attacks a planeswalker you control with 1 or more creatures, Oath of Kaya deals 2 damage to that player and you gain 2 life. Check it out, we have an Oath in a format where the second paragraph isn't flavor text and limited. So as with all Oaths, we should consider the first ability to be the real one. And it's solid. 3 mana, deal 3, gain 3. That is a solid good card. Relatively strong first pick, even though it's sorcery speed. Probably like a strong C+ or a B- right there. But in this set, the Planeswalker ability isn't flavor text because there's a decent chance that you'll have a Planeswalker under your control. And it's an actual real deterrent to your opponents attacking your planeswalkers. Having to take 2 and have you gain 2, that is a very real deterrent. Oath of Kaya just looks super solid, like a very strong B. I think you first pick this over everything but the most premium of removal and bombs. But again, this is your rare. There's probably nothing bombier in the pack. Strong B for Oath of Kaya. Pledge of Unity is up next. Pledge of Unity is 1 green-white for an instant at uncommon. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. You gain 1 life for each creature you control. Real conditional, obviously. If this is 2 counters, I think it's okay. Still not great. It is instant speed, though, so maybe it is just good. 3 or 4 creatures... Now it's like a better version of okay. It's even good at that point. I think you only want this if you absolutely definitely plan to go wide, which is apparently the official plan for green-white, is go wide, proliferate. And I think it'll be a totally okay C+ in the green-white deck. If for some reason you're not going super wide, this maybe drops a little bit. I'm not going to go above C+, though, because this does not pull you back. If you don't have a wide board state, this is overcosted or just flat out bad. So C+ for Pledge of Unity. Make sure you're going wide. Ral Storm Conduit is up next. Ral is 2 blue-red for a legendary planeswalker Ral at rare with 4 loyalty. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Ral Storm Conduit deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. +2, scry 1. -2, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, do you get it? He's a Storm Conduit because he works really well with Storm and pings off the copies. Anyways, it's a harderish to kill half a Gutter Snipe, which is pretty okay, though 4 is a little high for that, but +2 scry 1, that's fantastic, that's awesome. And then the copying the next spell is pretty darn cool, but you got to make sure you're doing that. Luckily, if you're in blue-red, you're probably the spells deck. You probably have spells that you want to copy. You're not going to use this all willy-nilly. I don't think you're just going to randomly copy a combat trick or something, but copying some removal or copying some bounce, copying in a mass instant or sorcery card, that's going to be really, really good. I think Ral is just a great pickup for blue-red, like a strong A minus, we'll say, because he doesn't protect himself at all. Actually, no, I think the lack of protection, we're going to have to drop Drow to like a B+. Obviously, that's in the blue-red spells deck. He's going to be absolutely amazing. If for some reason you're not in blue-red spells, he does drop a bit, but let's go with a B+ for Ral Storm Conduit. Up next is Ral's Outburst. Ral's Outburst is 2 blue-red for an instant at uncommon. Ral's Outburst deals 3 damage to any target. Look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. This card's really good. It's Lightning Bolt and draw my choice of 2 cards for 4 mana. Totally sold. Strong first pick, slightly weakened by it being 2 colors. Probably just a straight B. Being able to hit any target means it could just end the game as well. Solid B for Ral's Outburst. Up next is Roalesk Apex Hybrid. Roalesk is 2 green-blue for a legendary creature human mutant at Mythic. It's a 4/5 flying trample. When Roalesk Apex Hybrid enters the battlefield, put 2+1/+1 counters on another target creature you control. When Roalesk dies, proliferate, then proliferate again. This is like just a stereotypical bomby creature. It's a 4/5 flying trample for 5, which is definitely going to end many, many games right there. That alone is like a B+, A-. Getting the value of a minimum 2 counters when it comes out, assuming it's not the only creature on the board, and then hopefully getting 2 more, if not more, if it dies, because hopefully you have other stuff with counters other than what you just put Roalesk's counters on. Just a super solid creature. Slightly restrictive cost, but as long as you're Simic, you should be good, even if it maybe comes down a turn late or so because of the double green in there. Easy first pick, easy A for Roalesk Apex Hybrid. Role Reversal is up next. Role Reversal is blue-red for a sorcery at rare. Exchange control of 2 target permanents that share a permanent type. So this is switcheroo, but cheaper, and maybe you'll get to trade planeswalkers instead of creatures. You're probably never trading artifacts, you're probably never trading enchantments, you're never trading lands. You are trading planeswalkers or you're trading creatures in this format. This is obviously at its best if you have some middling creature that can be traded into bigger, better things, and it's technically only as good as your opponent's deck is. If your opponent's deck is bad, this card is bad. I don't think it's a strong first pick, but I think it will be that pick in some packs if the pack's really weak. The Walker trade situation I'm somewhat iffy on, since they all have static effects and generally somewhat ask you to build your deck around those effects, which means trading yours away, which your deck is probably slightly built around, for one that your deck is not built around is kind of weird. Also, as I've talked about before, the planeswalkers come down and barf out 50% of their value usually if they're one of the uncommon walkers, which means there's a good chance your opponent doesn't have a walker that's great. But there will be those rare times where your now useless uncommon walker can be traded for a rare one or a mythic one. It's going to be great. So yeah, I think this is like a B-. I wouldn't overly hype up the planeswalker trade just because they are, a lot of them kind of build aroundy, and your deck's just not going to be built around. I would strongly prefer to use this for creatures, I think. B- for Role Reversal. Rubblebelt Rioters is up next. Rubblebelt Rioters is 1 red-green for an 0/4 creature human berserker at uncommon. It's got a haste. Whenever Rubblebelt Rioters attack, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. This is a pretty cool design. It's an 0/4 for 3, which is awful if you don't have anything else, but it might hold the ground at least until you do for a short while. I think I'm fine as long as this is a 3/4 for 3. Most of the time, and anything higher is gas. That being said, you do need to plan to be aggro with this because it's just not killing anything on defense. I really like the design. I just don't know if I really like the card. I think it's fine, and I think it's around the C+ range, but I'm not sure if it's consistent enough for it to be a really good pick. Let's go with C+. I definitely want to play it, see how it goes. It could be an always include. It could be maybe actually just bad. Who knows? We'll see. C+ for Rubblebelt Rioters. Solar Blaze is up next. Solar Blaze is 2 red-white for a sorcery at rare. Each creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. I don't think so. This reads really good. It reads like a Wrath. I'm iffier though, because you don't get to control if your opponent's playing square statted creatures or not. There will be games where this is a one-sided Wrath only for your creatures. Your opponent has a board of 3/4s and you have a bunch of, I don't know, 9/9s. Well, guess what? This card's unplayable unless you just want to Wrath your board. So what I can tell you is I'm probably never picking this in the first few picks. And so I'm probably just never going to see it because somebody's going to pick it up and say, oh, this is so good. And so I'll never play this card. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good. You don't get to control what your opponent's stats are. And to an extent, you don't really get to control what your stats are. You need to take the creatures that are good. And I think attempting to build around not taking square statted creatures is an unreasonable restriction for you. So I think this is a D. I actively don't want to play it, and it's going to be impossible for me to play it because I'm not going to be picking this first, second, third, fourth, and so it's going to go away before I ever have a chance to see it. So D for Solar Blaze. Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord, out from the wall, is up next. 2 white-black for Sorin, Legendary Planeswalker Sorin at rare. 4 loyalty. As long as it's your turn, creatures and planeswalkers you control have lifelink. +2, Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker, and you would gain a life because planeswalkers you control have lifelink. -X, return target creature card with converted mana cost X from the graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a vampire in addition to its other types. This seems great. Great static ability. If you have any creatures, it represents some serious stabilization. +2 to deal the damage and gain a life because of that lifelink is awesome. Even if it's not killing anything, just pinging the face or taking down a planeswalker is going to be really good. Returning a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield for the minus ability is really good. Sorin is a bomb. A solid straight up bomb. First pick every time. Solid, solid, solid. A just misses the A+ for not protecting itself. A for Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord. And our final card for today is Soul Diviner. Soul Diviner is blue-black for a creature zombie wizard at rare. It's a 2/3. Tap it, remove a counter from an artifact, creature, land, or planeswalker you control. Draw a card. This is super interesting. I have to imagine it has more constructed value than limited. I'm not positive on that though, but it's still a 2/3 for 2 and will generate you some value whenever you decide that a card is worth more than that loyalty counter or that +1/+1 counter. I don't think this is exactly a first pick. I think it's a little bit more of a reward. Your blue-black, open this pack 2, awesome, grab that card. But it is still very, very, very good. It'll be like a B, I think, but I think you pick it ever so slightly lower. Like, it's definitely not going over premium removal. It's definitely not going over bombs, but it's a very good card. I think it's just a straight B in the blue-black deck. B for Soul Diviner. So that's going to wrap it up for today. We did the first 35 gold cards. Tomorrow we're going to do the rest of the gold cards, the colorless cards, the artifact cards, and the land cards, which happens to equal exactly 35. So we're going to see just as many cards tomorrow as we did today, except we are going to see a minimum 10 planeswalkers because we have all the hybrid ones to do. So stay tuned for that. Definitely let me know what you think of these cards, which ones you're excited to play. This is where a lot of the power comes in. You know, we had some colors earlier in the week that didn't sound great. Gold cards are typically across the board very, very good. So let me know what you agree with, disagree with, etc. in the comments down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. If you are watching this on Tuesday, April 23rd, definitely come on over to twitch.tv/TheManaLeak between 10 a.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Eastern to check out some War of the Spark Sealed. Wizards of the Coast has invited me to an early access event, giving me access to an account stocked full of gems and cards to play all the standard and sealed. I'm going to be playing sealed that I want for the day, so come check that out over at twitch.tv/TheManaLeak. If you want to help out the channel, you can go to patreon.com/TheManaLeak to become a backer. There's various rewards you can get there. You can go to inkedgaming.com, use the promo code ManaLeak 10, all one word, 10 as the number to get 10% off your order. You can click like on the video. You can click subscribe on the video. Those are free. Those are easy. And they definitely do help out the channel. If you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow for the last set review, the remaining cards. See you tomorrow.